Beverly Hills, 1969. In the smoke-filled back room of the most exclusive private club in Hollywood, two different definitions of masculine cool were about to collide over a poker table in the most legendary confrontation between blue-eyed legends. One believed cool was an art form to be perfected, the other believed it was a survival skill to be lived. The Hillcrest Country Club's private gaming room existed in a world of leather-bound luxury and old-money discretion that had been cultivated over decades of hosting the most powerful men in Hollywood. Crystal ashtrays caught the warm glow of expensive Cuban cigars. Aged whiskey sat in cut-glass decanters that had been gifts from grateful studio heads. The poker table itself was a masterpiece of green felt and mahogany that had hosted the most important business deals, political arrangements, and personal vendettas in the entertainment industry. Tonight's game was invitation only, the kind of ultra-exclusive gathering where studio deals were made between hands and careers could be won or lost on the turn of a card. The guest list read like a who's who of masculine Hollywood royalty, and every man in the room understood that the stakes weren't just financial, they were personal, professional, and deeply territorial. Paul Newman sat at the head of the table like a king holding court in his carefully constructed castle. At 39, Newman was Hollywood royalty in the truest sense, a man who had earned his throne through a combination of extraordinary talent and calculated career choices. His piercing blue eyes had first mesmerized audiences in Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. His rebellious charm had made him a legend in Cool Hand Luke. His natural athleticism had made him credible in action films, while his classical training at the actor's studio had earned him respect in dramatic roles. Newman approached everything in his life with the same meticulous preparation and intellectual rigor he brought to his acting. He studied poker strategy like a graduate student, preparing for comprehensive exams, analyzed his opponents, tells with scientific precision, and played each hand with the calculated intelligence that had made him one of the most respected and bankable actors of his generation. He was also, by every measure that mattered to Hollywood's power structure, the coolest man in the room. His style was effortless but carefully studied, his confidence earned through talent and sustained success, his reputation built on a foundation of genuine skill and undeniable screen presence. Around the table sat the elite of Hollywood's masculine pantheon, each representing a different facet of American masculinity on screen. Robert Redford, 33 and riding the highest wave of his career after Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, sat to Newman's right with the easy confidence of a man who'd proven he could carry a film alongside his mentor and emerge as an equal. Warren Beatty, 32 and fresh from revolutionizing American cinema with Bonnie and Clyde, occupied the seat across from Newman with the restless energy of someone who'd changed the rules of what movies could be. James Garner, 41 and beloved by audiences for his work in Maverick and the Rockford Files, brought his characteristic humor and professionalism to the table, serving as the group's unofficial diplomat. George Peppard, 40 and establishing himself as a serious dramatic actor after his breakthrough in Breakfast at Tiffany's, maintained the intense focus that had made him a star and a respected craftsman. Each man represented a different facet of American masculinity on screen, but all deferred to Newman's natural leadership and unquestioned status as the alpha of their generation. The conversation flowed easily between shop talk and personal anecdotes, creating the kind of comfortable male bonding that had built careers and lasting friendships. If you respect the real Steve McQueen, subscribe to Steve McQueen Untold Legacy. Then Steve McQueen walked through the door. At 39, McQueen was Newman's exact contemporary, but he inhabited a completely different universe of masculine energy. Where Newman was classically handsome, McQueen was dangerously attractive. Where Newman projected intellectual cool, McQueen radiated primal magnetism. Where Newman commanded respect through talent and preparation, McQueen demanded attention through pure presence. McQueen wore his standard uniform, perfectly fitted jeans, white button-down shirt, brown leather jacket that somehow managed to look both casual and expensive. His blonde hair was styled to look effortlessly tousled, and his pale blue eyes surveyed the room with the calculating assessment of a predator entering new territory. "Gentlemen," McQueen said, his voice carrying that familiar hint of mockery that suggested he found the entire gathering mildly amusing. The handshakes were performed, the pleasantries exchanged, but something fundamental had shifted in the room's energy. The easy camaraderie that had existed moments before was replaced by a subtle but unmistakable tension. McQueen settled into the empty chair directly across from Newman with the fluid grace that had made him famous. For 30 seconds, the two most magnetically cool actors in Hollywood simply looked at each other across 6 feet of green felt, each taking the other's measure like gunfighters sizing up opponents. Newman dealt the cards with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd been playing serious poker since his Yale drama school days. His movements were economical, precise, and utterly confident, the gestures of a man who controlled every element of his environment. McQueen picked up his cards without looking at them, his attention focused entirely on studying the other players at the table. He had learned long ago that poker was less about the cards in your hand than about the men holding the other cards, and Steve McQueen had been reading Dangerous Men since childhood. The first few hands passed without incident. Newman played with textbook precision, making calculated bets based on probability and position. Redford followed his mentor's lead with careful, conservative play. Beatty took calculated risks with the same revolutionary energy he brought to his film choices. McQueen played like he lived by instinct rather than strategy, trusting his ability to read people more than his knowledge of odds and percentages. As the evening progressed and the whiskey flowed, the conversation moved from shop talk to more personal territory. Stories were shared about difficult directors, demanding co-stars, and the peculiar pressures of life in the public eye. "The thing about this business," Newman said, dealing another hand with practiced authority, "is that it rewards intelligence as much as talent. You can't just show up and hope charisma carries you through. You need to understand your craft, study your characters, approach each role with the same discipline you'd bring to any serious profession." The comment wasn't directed at anyone in particular, but somehow everyone at the table understood it was meant for McQueen. Method acting, preparation, emotional truth, that's what separates the actors from the movie stars, Newman continued, his voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone who'd never questioned his own approach to his craft. McQueen sipped his bourbon and said nothing, but that half-smile playing at the corners of his mouth suggested he found Newman's lecture amusing for reasons that had nothing to do with agreement. "Paul's absolutely right," Redford added with the enthusiasm of a devoted student. "The audience can always tell when someone's just playing themselves versus when they're actually acting." "Absolutely," Beatty agreed, folding his hand and leaning back in his chair. "Real screen presence comes from transformation, not just from looking good in front of the camera." The conversation continued for several more hands, with Newman's circle reinforcing his philosophy of acting, while McQueen remained silent, observing, calculating. Then Newman made the mistake of pushing too hard. "You know, Steve," he said, his tone casual but his words carefully chosen, "I've always admired your success, but I sometimes wonder if you're not limiting yourself by playing essentially the same character in every film." The table went quiet. Even Garner, who'd been maintaining his usual good humor, sensed danger in the air. Newman continued, apparently oblivious to the warning signs that everyone else was beginning to recognize. "What I mean is, you've created this persona, the cool, rebellious loner, and it works beautifully for you. But it's essentially the same performance every time. You're not really acting so much as, well, being yourself on camera." He paused to sip his whiskey, then delivered what he clearly intended as the killing blow. "Don't take this the wrong way, but sometimes I think you're just imitating what you think cool looks like, rather than actually understanding what it means to be cool." The silence that followed was so complete that the distant sound of traffic on Sunset Boulevard seemed unnaturally loud. McQueen set down his bourbon glass with deliberate care, his pale blue eyes never leaving Newman's face. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but carried with perfect clarity. "Paul, that's interesting. Tell me more about what you think cool means." Newman, apparently thinking he'd gained the upper hand, warmed to his theme. "Cool is about control. It's about intelligence over emotion. It's about never letting anyone see you sweat, never revealing more than you intend to reveal. It's a discipline, like any other aspect of serious acting. He gestured around the table with proprietary confidence. Look at this room. Look at this gathering. This is what cool actually looks like. Successful men who've earned their success through talent and hard work, enjoying the rewards of their discipline and preparation. McQueen nodded slowly, as if he found this explanation fascinating. So cool is something you learn, something you practice, something you can get better at through study and preparation? Exactly, Newman replied, clearly pleased that McQueen seemed to be understanding his point. It's like any other skill. The more you work at it, the better you become. McQueen's smile widened slightly, but something dangerous entered his pale blue eyes. That's where you're wrong, Paul. The words hung in the air like smoke from expensive cigars. See, what you're describing isn't cool. What you're describing is performance. You're talking about playing cool, not being cool. McQueen leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to that whisper that anyone who knew him understood as a danger signal. Cool isn't something you study in acting class. It's not something you practice in front of a mirror. Cool is what happens when life backs you into a corner and you realize that panic is a luxury you can't afford. The other men at the table had stopped pretending to look at their cards. This had become something more significant than a poker game discussion. You want to know the difference between us, Paul? You learned to be cool because you thought it would make you a better actor. I had to be cool because it was the only thing that kept me alive. McQueen's voice grew stronger, more confident, as he continued. You studied rebellion at Yale Drama School. I lived it in reform schools, where showing weakness got you beaten unconscious. You researched what it meant to be tough for your roles. I learned to be tough because the alternative was being broken. Newman's confident expression was beginning to crack around the edges. When you play a rebellious character, you're drawing on emotional memory exercises and method acting techniques. When I play one, I'm just remembering Tuesday. McQueen reached for his bourbon, never breaking eye contact with Newman. So when you tell me I'm just imitating what I think cool looks like, you're missing the point entirely. I'm not imitating anything, I'm just being myself. And if that makes you uncomfortable, maybe the problem isn't with my approach to acting. He took a slow sip of bourbon, letting that sink in. You see, Paul, you perform cool. I am cool. You study it like a subject you're trying to master. I live it like a language I've been speaking since childhood. The devastation in his voice was quiet but complete. And the audience? The audience can tell the difference. They always can. When they watch you being cool, they think, look how well Paul Newman is playing cool. When they watch me, they forget they're watching a performance at all. Newman's face had gone through several shades of red, but McQueen wasn't finished. You want to talk about limitation? Let me tell you about limitation. Limitation is being so dependent on preparation and technique that you can't trust yourself to just exist authentically in front of a camera. Limitation is needing to study how to be something that other people just are. McQueen stood up slowly, his movement as fluid and controlled as everything else about him. Thanks for the poker game, gentlemen. And Paul, thanks for the acting lesson. Always good to learn from someone who's worked so hard to become what some people are born being. He placed a $20 bill on the table and walked toward the door, then paused and looked back at Newman one final time. Oh, and about that imitation thing? You might want to think about which one of us has been trying to sound like the other since 1958. The sound of the door closing behind McQueen seemed unnaturally loud in the absolute silence that followed. Newman sat frozen for nearly a minute, his poker face completely shattered, his hands gripping his cards with white-knuckled intensity. Around the table, some of Hollywood's biggest stars stared at their hands, at their drinks, at anything other than the man who'd just been systematically destroyed. Finally, Redford cleared his throat softly. Paul, should we continue the game? Newman looked down at his cards as if he'd never seen them before, then slowly placed them face down on the green felt. I think I'm done for tonight. The aftermath was swift and lasting. Word of the confrontations spread through Hollywood within days, carried by the 5 witnesses who'd watched Newman's philosophy of cool get dismantled by McQueen's lived experience. Some said it was the most brutal takedown in Hollywood history. Others called it a necessary education in the difference between performed authenticity and the genuine article. But everyone agreed on one thing. Steve McQueen had proven once again that real cool couldn't be learned, couldn't be practiced, couldn't be perfected through study. It could only be lived. And some people were just better at living it than others. Subscribe to Steve McQueen Untold Legacy for stories they never told you.